Nina sat alone in her car long after the engine had gone silent. The dashboard clock glowed 5:47 a.m., the numbers sharp and unforgiving in the dim light. The world outside was still half asleep. Streetlights flickered like tired witnesses. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed and then faded, as if even urgency had learned to give up eventually. Her hands rested on the steering wheel, fingers still, knuckles pale. She hadn't cried. That was the part that scared her most. Because once, not long ago, disappointment used to break her open. It used to spill out of her in hot tears and shaking breaths and whispered prayers. Now it just sat inside her heavy, quiet, patient. Like something waiting. Nina pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and closed her eyes. "You can't keep doing this," a voice inside her whispered. "You can't keep pushing like this. Something is going to give." She didn't answer the voice. She never did. Because Nina had learned a long time ago that answering doubt gave it permission. Instead, she inhaled slowly. Deeply. The kind of breath you take when you don't know what else to do except survive the next moment. Today mattered. Today wasn't just another day. Today was the day everything she'd worked for over the last 7 years would either finally recognize her or erase her. She straightened up, opened the car door, and stepped into the cold morning air. The building loomed ahead of her, glass and steel and ambition. A place that promised opportunity but demanded pieces of your soul in return. As she walked toward the entrance, heels clicking softly against the pavement, Nina felt the familiar weight settle on her chest. The weight of knowing she would show up anyway. Because that's what she did. No matter how tired. No matter how unseen. No matter how afraid. She always showed up. Backstory: how courage was built in silence. Nina hadn't always known she was strong. In fact, for most of her life, she believed the opposite. She grew up watching other people take up space effortlessly, laughing loudly, speaking boldly, walking through the world like it was designed to accommodate them. Nina learned early how to shrink. How to listen more than she spoke. How to work twice as hard and expect half the recognition. Her mother used to tell her, "Keep your head down. Let your work speak." And Nina did. She kept her head down so long she almost forgot how to look up. In school, she was the girl teachers relied on but never worried about. The dependable one. The quiet achiever. The student whose excellence was assumed, not celebrated. She told herself it didn't matter. "I'm not doing this for applause," she'd think. "I'm doing this because it's who I am." But somewhere deep inside, a small ache began to form. At night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, Nina would wonder what it would feel like to be chosen instead of overlooked. To be praised without having to ask. To be seen. She carried that ache into adulthood. Into her career. Into every room where she delivered brilliance wrapped in humility. When she entered her industry, competitive, ruthless, unforgiving, she thought her work ethic would protect her. That if she just kept delivering results, eventually someone would notice. And for a while, it worked. She became indispensable. Projects thrived under her leadership. Deadlines bent around her discipline. When things fell apart, people called Nina not because she was loud, but because she was reliable. "She'll handle it," they'd say. And she always did. But praise went elsewhere. Credit drifted upward, toward louder voices and shinier personalities. Nina watched as ideas she'd nurtured quietly were presented by others with confidence and claimed as their own. At first, she told herself it was fine. The work matters more than the recognition. But the human heart doesn't lie forever. There were nights she sat alone, exhaustion pooling in her bones, wondering if she was invisible or if she had made herself that way. Fear crept in slowly. Fear that maybe this was all she would ever be. Fear that her strength was being mistaken for silence. Fear that if she stopped pushing, everything she'd built would disappear. And yet, she kept going. Rising challenges when giving up makes sense. The pressure didn't arrive all at once. It accumulated. Like water dripping steadily into a cup you don't notice until it overflows. Responsibilities multiplied. Expectations grew heavier. The margin for error vanished. People leaned on Nina without asking if she could carry any more weight. And she did. She carried deadlines through sleepless nights. She carried teams through uncertainty. She carried the quiet burden of being the one who never failed because failing didn't feel like an option. But something began to crack. It showed up in small ways. The tightness in her chest when her phone buzzed late at night. The way her shoulders stayed tense even on weekends. The voice in her head that whispered, "How long can you keep this up?" Then came the moment that almost broke her. A project she had led from conception to execution, a project that demanded every ounce of her creativity, discipline, and resolve, was publicly credited to someone else. She sat in the meeting room, hands folded in her lap, listening as praise flowed around her like she wasn't there. Her name was never mentioned. Something inside her went still. After the meeting, she locked herself in the restroom and stared at her reflection. Her eyes looked tired. Not weak. Tired. And for the first time, the thought surfaced clearly. What if I stop? What if she stopped over-delivering? What if she stopped caring so much? What if she walked away from a place that took without giving? Giving up suddenly felt reasonable. Logical. Safe. And that terrified her. Because Nina didn't recognize herself in the woman who wanted to quit. The identity shift the moment she chose herself. The turning point didn't come with fireworks. It came in silence. Late one night, Nina sat alone on her apartment floor, back against the couch, lights off, city glow spilling faintly through the window. Her phone lay beside her, unread messages piling up. She felt empty. And then, beneath the exhaustion, something stirred. Anger. Not the loud kind. The clean kind. The kind that says, enough. She thought about every moment she had pushed past fear. Every time she had shown up when no one expected her to. Every quiet victory she'd won without applause. And suddenly, she understood something she'd never allowed herself to see. Her power had never been dependent on recognition. It had been forged in endurance. In consistency. In courage she practiced daily without naming it. She whispered into the darkness, "I'm done waiting." That sentence changed everything. Not because it was loud but because it was true. Nina realized she had been asking permission to step fully into herself. And she didn't need it. In that moment, her identity shifted not from weak to strong, but from waiting to deciding. She would no longer shrink to be acceptable. She would no longer confuse humility with invisibility. She would no longer abandon herself for approval. Courage wasn't something she needed to find. It was something she needed to choose. And she did. Transformation when action matches identity. The change wasn't dramatic at first. It was deliberate. Nina began speaking clearly, calmly, without apology. She documented her work. Claimed her contributions. Drew boundaries where silence used to live. She stopped over-explaining. Stopped shrinking. Stopped waiting to be invited into rooms she had already built. When resistance came, she didn't flinch. When doubt surfaced, she met it with action. People noticed. Not because she demanded attention but because her presence had shifted. She walked differently. Stood differently. Decided differently. Opportunities followed not magically, but inevitably. Because the woman who always got it done had finally decided to get it done for herself. And in doing so, she became unstoppable. The sweet truth about courage. Months later, Nina stood once again in her car, this time after sunset. But this moment felt different. She wasn't waiting. She was reflecting. She thought about the woman she used to be, the one who equated silence with strength, endurance with worth. And she smiled softly. Courage hadn't arrived as confidence. It had arrived as commitment. To herself. Nina stepped out of the car and walked forward, unafraid. Because she knew now. She didn't need permission to take up space. She didn't need validation to be powerful. She didn't need fear to disappear to move forward. She was already everything she had been waiting to become. A message for you. If you're watching or listening to this and something in you feels seen, this is for you. You are stronger than you think. Courage is not a personality trait, it's a decision. And the version of you who always gets it done already exists. You just have to choose her. If this story spoke to you, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more powerful, soul-lifting stories that remind you who you truly are. You're not behind. You're becoming.